now I know how to do this because I've just spent a year trying to find the weirdest angle on a thing. And I know that's what y'all do at Daily Show. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to find the weird angle. And I nailed the audition and booked the show.
Welcome to the Why Not Me podcast. I'm Mike Jackson. I'm a partner at Get Lifted Film Co. and your host. Today's guest is Roy Wood Jr. You probably know him from The Daily Show or his stand-up or a million different things that he's done professionally. But I am so excited to share this conversation with you guys. Roy is a friend. He is brilliant. He is funny. And this conversation will highlight all of that. You ready? Let's go. Roy Wood Jr., Why Not Me with Mike Jackson. I hope you enjoy it. My guy, so Why Not Me? This podcast we do to kind of have conversations and serve as a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of a blueprint. Because when we all are kind of on our journey, we have these why not me moments where, we have to figure out our shit and make pivots and try to level up or whatever that thing is. But it's all about where we start our journey. So for you,
Okay.
You were born on December 11th. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's my daddy's birthday. So you Sagittarius I know y'all.
Your daddy had a lot of girlfriends.
He's a Rolling Stone for sure. I have two sisters I've never met.
Okay, I'm not that wild yet. I just got the one. I see him every day.
Good man. December 11th, in Manhattan you were born, correct?
Yeah, it was Manhattan. Yeah, we lived in Manhattan. That's where we were to start. And then 9 months later, we were down south.
Where was that? Memphis, I think?
Yeah, we went to Memphis. My parents got separated for a little while, then reconciled. Somewhere around when I was in like the second or third grade, and then I went to Birmingham.
So born in Manhattan, the only child, I'm guessing, of your parents. Not your daddy, because we already hit on that. But
yeah, I'm my mom's only child. Correct. I grew up essentially an only child. I had a lot of half siblings around Birmingham. I have two younger. I have a bunch older. But in terms of my everyday life, I grew up alone, talking to my toys and everything else that an only child, the idiosyncrasies of growing up alone. And a latchkey kid, so there was nobody in the house too.
What sounds really cool. I was an only child as well. And it's like, I don't have to get in trouble. There's no one to answer to. But when you look back on it, you're like, I was doing some things.
Yeah, but then I also look back at that as being like the creative genesis point for me being comfortable talking to myself.
That's
which
fair.
is a very important part creatively for me in terms of being comfortable. Well, what about this? Well, you do that. Like that type of stuff. Oh yeah, that all started when I was an only child.
So let me ask you, I know for me as an only child, I'm social, I have friends, like I can engage in all of that stuff, but I'm at pure heart, I'm a loner. And I crave alone time, not just to collect my thoughts, but just like be in my own space for whatever the reason. Do you find yourself as an only child also being a loner, or do you crave companionship and company from others?
I've often said that I have the desire to I want to be alone with other people, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
Like my ideal gathering is 20 people or less.
Mm-hmm.
If you put me in any setting where there's more than 20 people, I'm probably uncomfortable. That includes stand-up comedy.
Oh, really?
I just don't vibe well with a lot of stimuli happening around. Very isolating by choice. I have people I'm cool with, like one or two folks I'm cool with, but like the idea of an entourage, like when I see comedians and they just got all these people with them, I'm like, God, that's just gotta be, that just seems so stressful. Like I want to come to the venue alone. I don't always get to, but it's like, God, that just seems exhausting. to live that type of life.
That's wild to me. I would think separate. I mean, I would think as a comedian or like, I'm not a comic, obviously, but I always feel like entertainers, it's almost in a way like playing a sport. Not necessarily a team sport. Sometimes it is a team sport, but it's like, I always feel like that energy that you can get from people right before you hit the stage could be like a benefit. But then again, everyone has their own rhythm, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, that helps. I mean, I love what I do. Part of why I love it is because I am alone on stage. And it's why I hate improv. I tried to do improv for a month in college, and I knew right then at 19 years old, this is not for me. It's too many other people having opinions on what I'm trying to do, and I don't like it. I ain't with it.
A one-man gang.
Yeah, but the moment I'm off stage, like this idea of where we going, where we hanging after the show and all of that, it's like, I don't know. There's a picture of me that I posted the night of the correspondence dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture is me on stage alone as everyone is leaving the room.
Wow.
And it's such a perfect picture to encapsulate that night for me, because it's like everybody, like that entire day, all it is people. It's my writers for hours. Then it's my family and my mom, and then there's a barber, and then there's a makeup person, then there's a stylist, and then there's your friends, and then there's your agents and your managers and everybody at your table. And then you're into the shit. So now it's red carpets and mingling and talking to people while the whole time I'm trying not to forget my fucking jokes, dog. And like it's all of these things happening, and then you meet the vice president, and then there's a security detail, and then you're on the dais and you're sitting out there for 3 hours while this show is happening. It's just people and people and people. And then you get up to the stage, and then finally you're alone. And it's horrific, but you do the job.
Sure.
And when I sat back down and the night ended and everybody got up to leave, you know, the president and the vice president clear first for security. And then when they were clear, the person comes up and goes, okay, Roy, you can come back and we'll take you to, well, I'm good. I just want to sit here for a minute.
Like I'm exhausted right now.
I was exhausted. And it was the only peace and quiet I had the entire weekend. Wow. Was that 5-6 minutes of just being alone, but with other people.
Right. I get it.
And like that was, I just don't think people understand just how stressful that people can be sometimes. And it's not their fault. It's just I'm my most comfortable when there's less people. And you're probably right. A lot of it probably has to do with the upbringing of just, I didn't grow up with a house with 5-6 people. I didn't grow up with a bunch of siblings. I didn't grow up arguing and yelling all the time. Because there's people that are the opposite who need to be around people.
All the time.
Yeah, they feel the darkness of being, the darkness of solitude horrifies them.
Yeah.
I live for it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, the fact that I have 3 toddlers and a wife, you know, at this stage in life, I've been so used to being on my own all the time, you know, and now it's like within like that, it's a different existence. And it's a beautiful thing to have a family, but I like to be alone with people. That's my alone with people when I go to my man cave or like my private, my space within the home, just to like kind of center myself and, you know.
You have to have that. You absolutely have to have that. And it's something I'm slowly trying to instill in my son because, you know, he's very social and I like being around him and we do stuff. But then I'm also like, hey, man, it's okay to just sit and play chess.
Yeah.
With the computer or something. It's okay to just sit and read a book. Like every moment doesn't have to be filled with all of these, because if you're not careful, when you like being alone is a skill set.
I agree.
And being comfortable with being alone is, and there are going to be days where you're not going to be able to be connected. And I don't want him sitting there, you know, going crazy and, you know, crawling up a wall.
I mean, COVID. I mean, a lot of people are alone and they couldn't handle that shit, you know?
Yeah.
And it didn't end so well for some people. So
Yeah, COVID forced a lot of people together, and it also forced a lot of people alone. I still think we're dealing with the ripple effects of that, to a
for sure.
degree.
For sure. Okay. So born in Manhattan, moved to Memphis, and then eventually Birmingham. Tell me a little bit about your father. He was a broadcaster, a radio broadcaster?
Yeah. So my dad was quite easily, in my opinion, one of the more influential radio journalists, of his era, that era being the 1950s, 40s, 50s, until he died in 1995. Um, I think that there is a lot of, you want to talk about being alone. So he was a radio news journalist. And so not only that, in a lot of newsrooms, he was the first Black person to be working for these outlets. And so my father was a reporter, no different than, say, like a Black Anderson Cooper, where wherever it's chaos, he pulling up with the tape recorder and doing the interviews. So, he's in South Africa, covering the riots in Soweto. He was in Rhodesia, which eventually became Zimbabwe, like getting shot at Vietnam. Anything you can name during the civil rights movement, my father was there and covered, Bloody Sunday, March on Washington, Ruby Bridges, like he's there. He's there and just covering that. And so he was always somebody that was like trying to tell the story of Black people across the diaspora, like not just Black Americans, but just the idea of Blackness as a singular connected thing.
Right.
So yeah, that was definitely a big influence, I think, stylistically on my approach to humor, was watching him. I came up in a house where there was always a newspaper laying around. There was always a Time magazine laying around, an Ebony, a Jet, a Black Enterprise laying around, watching 60 Minutes and Jeopardy. And like all of those things just help to create, who I am. So that's who he was, in terms of the professional side. Now, on the personal side, because he worked a lot, and it's journalism, it's nomadic. So he moved a lot, he was on a lot, he was away a lot. And I think that also shaped a little bit of a degree of my own independence, towards the world. Because, my mom at the same time, she's been in higher education 40 years at a number of Black colleges. And so my mom has always been, grad school and master's degrees and law degrees and always pursuing another level. She in night school. So she gone a lot too.
Wow.
So it left me just curious about the world, and I was able to follow a lot of those curiosities on my own. I'm very lucky, man, that I grew up in a neighborhood where most people came to our house instead of me having to travel in the neighborhood.
Right.
I grew up, on the west side of Birmingham. Birmingham is where I tend to, if the story of my life is told, Birmingham is where, a lot of the social seeds were planted for who I became.
Right.
We grew up on the west side of Birmingham, which, West End is interesting in that it's one of those Black hoods where even in the hood, there's a good side of the hood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all Black. It's all one of the worst zip code, 35211, statistically one of the worst zip codes in the state of Alabama. But over here is where you can get shot. Over here is where you do drugs. And right here is where you can go to the library to take computer classes.
So wait, but your dad's he's an accomplished journalist. Your mom is working in universities and higher education. But even that, their wages were such that it was still only a certain level that they could rise to as far as how to take care of their family.
You know what? I wonder about that. I think, I know for sure a big part of it for my dad was being close to us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, we had the nicest house in the worst neighborhood. So I don't know what that's worth, but the idea of living around wealth, and which would still be whiteness in Birmingham in the
Sure.
80s, in the mid 80s, because also this is also an important detail. In Birmingham mid 80s, this is the rise of white flight. So what few white people still lived in Birmingham proper were dipping.
Right.
So if you were going to live in Birmingham proper and have a decent neighborhood, you was going to be around us regardless. It's just a matter of how nice of a neighborhood. You know, I don't know why my dad chose that house. That's a great question. I need to dig in on my mom and figure that out. But there was definitely there was definitely, you know, in living in that area, I benefited from the fact that my parents kept me busy. So within 1 mile of our house, there was a public library and there was a boys and girls club. Those two things were pivotal. Third thing was my mom, I think in the 5th grade, she got me a basketball goal installed in the driveway. So now instead of having to walk up to Powderly Park, where God knows what could be happening, and this is the rise of kids getting their sneakers stolen and you getting murdered for your starter jackets and, you know, stray bullets, and, you know, like that was a new thing at that time.
Yeah.
You know,
Scary.
yeah, but I don't know. It's just you grow up in that, you don't really think about what it is at the time because you're a kid and you're just living. But now when I look back on it, I go, oh, you kept me busy in the boys club. You kept me going to the library to play computer, Oregon Trail. I was taking computer literacy courses. You know, it'd be coding now, but in those days, it was just an Apple IIe. So you're just learning C colon prompts and, you know, MS-DOS
Yeah.
and all of that, right?
Yep.
And so that was our childhood, you know. We lived next door to this really sweet white lady, Miss Murray. And then on the other side of her was an active crack house.
Damn. I mean, she didn't flee. She didn't. A white flight didn't hit her. Apparently.
Nah, she was very much on that. This is my home, and I'm gonna stay here, and I ain't gonna never sell. And she never sold until she died. Give her credit.
So let me ask you this. So the Boys and Girls Club, the library, mom's working in higher education, and then dad being in broadcast. Like, you know, I didn't know this about you until recently because I was, you know, doing a little homework. But like, you started in radio, correct?
Yeah.
All of those things prepared you, I'm assuming, and then your father, for my guess, being a role model to you in a lot of regards, right? Like, and seeing him doing it, I presume that like that pointed you in that direction.
On some osmosis shit though. Like, I never grew up wanting to be like my dad.
Okay.
I knew what he did for a living, but I never grew up trying to be like him.
Okay.
I didn't hate what he did. I didn't rebel against it. I mean, of course, you know, you have a good father, bad husband. There's a certain level of disdain you're going to feel towards a man for how he may mistreat your mom, just on some being emotionally neglectful. We're not talking physical abuse or nothing like that. But the idea of, man, I really wish you'd play things different at the house. But like when I turned 15, I got a learner's permit. And so it's two things if we're talking radio and influence. So when I lived in Memphis and my parents were still separated, I got sent to Birmingham every summer as part of the custody, whatever, right? So Memphis City schools ended before Birmingham City. My pops didn't trust me at the house by myself because he didn't know the neighborhood yet, whatever. So I would have to come with him to work at 5 o'clock in the fucking morning.
Damn, 15.
Like,
damn.
You just know, like, this is like, I'm talking first grade, second grade. So
I misunderstood that. Okay.
No, I'll get to the 15 in a second.
Okay.
But we didn't move to Birmingham, my mom and I, until I was in the 3rd grade. So first grade, second grade, every summer, the first 2 weeks of my summer is in Birmingham. This motherfucker is making me get up with him to go to work because he don't trust me at home by myself. Because my mom could leave me at home because it was a neighborhood full of kids. You had other grown-ups watching. You knew the neighborhood. This was very much in that era in the 80s where you could let your child go outside and you knew some other adult in the vicinity would whip him.
The village.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's Birmingham. My pops don't know the village. He just got here. So nah, motherfucker, you can't go run around outside. So if you here with me, you going to come with me to my job.
Right.
So every day I would get up at 5 a.m. My pops and we would go to Hardee's and we would get a biscuit. And then we would go and I would sit on the floor of the control room and listen to my dad do the news on the 10s for 2 hours straight. And just listen to him read the news. Then he would take calls from the community and interact with people on the calls and talk with folks or whatever. And then at 7:30, my dad's friend, Francine Palmer, would pick me up from the radio station and drop me off at fucking school, bro. So
you just got out of school, now you're back?
My pops is trying to figure out a place to put me that ain't daycare, after school, whatever, the YMCA in those days in the summer, because school wasn't out yet, because Birmingham City wasn't out yet. The Y and the Boys Club wasn't a daytime thing.
Was education to your dad at the same level as it was for your mother? Meaning
in terms of his degrees and his pursuit and give a damn about education, absolutely.
Okay.
He was 100% about that. So that's why he believed in just, you finished, what grade you just finished? First grade? Cool. Miss Palmer going to take you up to Kingston Elementary. You're going to sit in with the second graders so you can learn what you headed into. And then at 3 o'clock, he'd pick me up and we'd go home and we'd have a basic evening. But I say all of that to say, being around that on a regular basis did something. Then when I turned 15, I got a learner's permit and I really wanted to drive on the freeway. And my dad had a gig down at Alabama State. He had a talk show he did every Saturday at Alabama State, an hour away. So I volunteered to drive him. And so on the drive down, he would listen to whatever he needed to listen to prep for that episode of the talk show. So it might be a Jesse Jackson speech, a Farrakhan speech. My pops might be listening to some old stuff from a speech he did 3 years ago to glean a point that he's trying to make today about a thing. And he was so, not, unknowingly, those things all seeped in. But, the idea of pursuing radio for me was about comedy. I just wanted to be funny. I know how to do journalistic stuff. My degree is in broadcast. But I really want to talk about silly shit.
But your first radio job was journalism, right? In Tallahassee? Was that a journalism job? 105.7, right?
So I go RIP to Hot 105.7. Let's go on now. WVHT, North Florida, South Georgia's #1 for hip hop in the old school. This is because we would play like Lil Milton and Bobby Blue Bland in the morning. And then at like 10 a.m., then it would transition into, rap and escape and
wow.
It's 98. Like that was, So I start there. I get them to create an internship because I was in college. And so at the time when I was in school, I stole credit cards and gotten caught. So I was on probation. And so when you're on probation, you have to do employment or education. Like that's part of for me, that was part of the terms of whatever, right?
Real quick, how'd you get caught?
Oh, the girl snitched. She undercharged us for this. We took a card into Dillard's and the girl charged us less for the items to leave more space on the card to buy more shit.
Right.
And her supervisor's like, what are you selling in Tommy Hilfiger for $7? She way undercharged us. She should have been charging like $40 for an $80 hit.
Right.
But she was charging like $3. Like it was crazy.
She fucked it up.
Bro, we had like $1,200 worth of shit, and she probably charged, the total was probably like $83 or something.
That's a red flag for real.
Well, the bigger red flag was security watching the tape and watching 3 teenagers buy $2,000 worth of clothing. Right. That doesn't seem,
It's not happening.
Sometimes it ain't racism. Sometimes you're just right, officer.
They did do that shit, and we got it on tape, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's how we got caught. So I get on probation. Now, the probation, I get suspended from school for a semester for violence. You can't get arrested in college. You know, if you acting a fool, we might expel you. But
Right.
we,
Oh,
your
you're in
dad
college
used
at
to.
this point.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah. I'm
21,
19.
19. Okay.
I'm
Got it.
19 years old.
Okay.
My pops used to teach at FAMU. My mother is a graduate of their grad school.
And you went there as well, right?
Correct. And that's the only thing that kept me from getting expelled was
Okay.
a lot of the people that were adjudicating my status, in terms of suspension or expulsion. There were a lot of people who had my back.
Right.
Probably people I don't even know or who will never be named to this day,
Right.
who had my back.
Thank God.
Off connects from my parents, right?
Yep.
So I started doing stand-up during the suspension. That's how I got into comedy. I come back after the suspension and I want to get an internship. You have to work at the campus radio station to get credit for your broadcast degree.
Mm-hmm.
The only slots available were weekend slots. All the other students had signed up for all the weekday slots. I can't work weekends because I'm fucking on the road. But I gotta get this credit. And around the same time, there was a radio station that was starting up in Tallahassee. And I listened to them every morning. And the thing I noticed is that they didn't offer news. Well, if it's one thing I know how to do, I know how to read the news. I saw my dad, like, I know that every morning show needs news. Every Black morning show needs a news person.
Mm-hmm.
So I rode my bike up to the station and I waited for them to get off the air at 10. And I asked this gentleman, Van Wilson, who was the host and the program director of the station. I just volunteered, hey man, can I come here 3 times a week and just read the news in the morning on the, 5 after and 35 after? And he said, absolutely. And that was the beginning of my career in radio that ran about 15 years. And, Van, the thing that really helped with that, and this gets into the comedy aspect of it, I was doing the news because that's what I knew. That's journalism, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, this is the rise of Black, 98 is we're in the apex of the Black comedy boom. So the idea of Black comedians being on the radio and tearing up stuff and really being hilarious. J. Anthony Brown is hitting his stride on Tom Joyner. At this time, Russ Parr is having comedians on a regular.
Yeah.
And so, the local show in Tallahassee, they hire a local comic who happens to be a school teacher. So at 8:00, he got a dip. So on the days that I could stay late,
why not you?
I got to slide right in. And so essentially 6 to 8 was me watching William Gilmore is his name. My first mentor in the comedy and radio space. Gilmore, I get to watch him for 2 hours, how he navigates humor, how he thinks about jokes, how he moves things around. And then 8 to 10, I get to do it too. And so that was how I started working the muscle of being funny on the air. And that was my thing. So I would do the stories, then I would pick one story that I knew I had jokes about.
Smart.
So that's no different than The Daily Show. It's literally what a correspondent does on The Daily Show. Here's a news story. Now, here's why I'm going to make it funny and tell you why it's bullshit. That was my thing. So that's how the radio journey started. And so then I get to Birmingham and essentially I'm able to take the audition, the audio tapes that I have from my time in Tallahassee, the internship I created, is what got me the job replacing Ricky Smiley in Birmingham.
Where does the Buck Wild show figure into all of this?
That's where that started.
That was the beginning, right? Okay, I didn't hear the name. Yeah.
So the Buck Wild morning show, and it's not the same Buck Wild from Starring Buck Wild. It's a different Buck Wild.
Okay.
But this guy Buck was the morning show host in Birmingham, and he was the man. He was the guy, and there were people before him, but he was the guy that had ushered in the rise of Ricky Smiley. And at this point, Ricky's a star. Ricky's left Birmingham to start the show that eventually became what we know today, as the Ricky Smiley morning show, the syndicated show.
Right.
I go through I don't know, probably 2 weeks of back and forth with the Buckwild Morning Show of trying to get on the show. I eventually lied my way on and get an internship. And I anything that they needed to do, I did. And while at the same time, I was also still on the road as a stand-up. And it was a beautiful time, man. I slept 4 hours a night. Some nights, like I would do the show till 10 in the morning and then drive 4 hours to a city to go do a show that night, nap after the show till midnight or 1, get back in my car, drive 4 hours back to Birmingham to be on the air the next day. I did that for at least 5 years. If the gig was within 5 hours of Birmingham, I called them quick flips. I'm just going there and back. You do the math and lay it on paper, it's still just an 18, 19-hour day. That ain't no different than you just being up all day.
And what is this, like 2000, 2001, or late 90s?
2001 through about 06.
Okay.
That was the real radio grind years. And so being on that show gave me an opportunity to watch the best stand-up comedian. Birmingham, Alabama, as a entertainment market, books the same names as any city you can name. The same names come through Birmingham.
Right.
So I got to watch all of my comedy heroes come in and do radio, and it really made me a student of stand-up comedy. But what started happening was Ricky had created such a lane for himself stylistically that I had to kind of go, another way. And what I just kept coming back towards was just the news. I like the news. I find it interesting. I've always grown up around it. I wonder if there's ways to make the news funny. So now I'm doing a comedic version of what I was doing for real in college.
Right.
And like hood report news, coming up with fake news, but
Like
reading it in a real news voice. Yeah. Yes.
But wait, also around this time, I mean, everyone knows about you doing Last Comic Standing when you placed, but you did it a couple times prior. And wasn't the first time around this time?
Yeah, 2004. 2004, I did not get past the daytime auditions. It was bad, bro. And then 2007, I got to the semifinals, which was like the second round, and I was still on the radio and I was still doing my thing, but I'm building two things at the same time was kind of the idea, because I didn't want to take my foot off of either gas.
Right.
At the time I thought radio would build into this beautiful syndicated thing, but it never really congealed for me. But stand up, over the course of that same from 2001 to 2007, I did Apollo, I did Comic View 3 times, I did Comedy Central, I did David Letterman in 2006, I did Def Jam. I did a whole run of building my stand-up, building a name for myself in stand-up, while at the same time still being entrenched in radio. The thing about radio, local radio in Birmingham, is that we were a local station. And so we were always at community events. And so it is impossible to be constantly in the Black community and be a part of an organization that's helping to solve problems. Or we're partnering with the organizations that are addressing real issues in the Black community.
Sure.
And that not leave something on you.
It's impossible.
And so then that's when my stand-up started to transition a little bit, because it's when you're young, you tell people what you think because you ain't seen nothing. And then when you get older and you mature as a stand-up, you tell people what you saw and what you thought about what you saw.
Observational comedy.
Yeah. Or it's about yourself. I've looked at myself and here are the things that I have observed about myself. Comedy's either inward or outward. The pros are able to switch between both effortlessly, or do a joke that informs you about both at the same time. Like those are the golden childs, the Pryors and the Chappelles of it all. So like that to me was kind of where my stand up and the civics and the politics and how the world works or doesn't work started from was 1000% in radio. It just took time to find it. So then you fast forward to like say 2010 or 2011 where I'm hosting the morning show now. Well, now I am my father
You
because
literally are.
I care about the exact same things he cares about. I want to tell stories that benefit and inform the exact same group of people. The only difference is I tell a couple jokes along the way.
How did that feel like
That's it.
seeing him and you in that regard? Like, since that wasn't the end game, so to speak, was it comfortable and cool, or were you like, was it a little bit of an internal battle in a way because you wanted to be in your own lane, separate from your dad?
It's still a battle. Yeah, it's still a battle. You spend all your life trying to get out of somebody's shadow, and then you just have to accept that. Oh wait, no, you never escape the shadow. You just have to
Right.
be your own self. Like that's the goal. And it's like, oh, well, damn, that's what I should have been doing all along. It's just
All
being
time.
myself. Yeah, like
Not to mention
this,
you carry his name.
yeah. So this idea of I want to be remembered for something other than being your son. So I'm going to work ridiculously hard at those things so that when people hear my name, they don't even think of you.
Do you think people, as you started to achieve more success and people that knew your journey, do you think that they appreciate it and recognized all the work that you put into it? Or do you think some people thought, oh, his dad put him on, so to speak? You know what I mean?
No, I don't think many people, at least not in Birmingham. I can only that's like what you're presenting is probably more of a Birmingham perspective. But in Birmingham, or at least in the Black community, I don't think we have the same ideas about nepotism and nepo babies and things
Right.
like that. I don't think that approach is the same, only because it is expected that you go into the family business in a way. I got a buddy, he's a fourth generation mortician.
Mm.
That's what you do. You get into the family business. So for me, the family business was radio. So that's what we do. The irony is that you want to be more established than your father. Then you realize the more you establish yourself, the more you're just building his name and building the brand, because you're just taking what he did and making it even more grand.
Right.
And once you understand and accept that as a son, that your job is to build upon what your parents have laid out for you, it's not to build separate. It's to build on
Elevate
top
the
of.
legacy.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's what it is. And so, there's no one in the city of Birmingham that's going to talk to me without first mentioning my father, especially Black people over like 40 or 50.
Right.
He is and will always be first.
And that's okay. He came first, but you're taking
As
it
it
to the
should
next
be.
level. Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're
But
evolving.
at that time, you're angry because it's like, well, I'm tired of y'all talking to me about him. I'm funny and I be doing stuff. So I'm going to just do everything. And it's like, calm down, bro. You're literally the host of a morning show at the station your father helped to start.
The comparison can't
Settle
not
down.
happen. Yeah. Stay in
Half
your
the
lane.
people in the sales department your father hired.
That's wild. That's wild. So now you've done all this work, you've educated yourself and you've done the stand-up. And then all of a sudden, I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but the Daily Show, you're so prepared for this gig as a correspondent. Tell me how you got it. Just tell me a little bit about the origin story of the Daily Show, because that's definitely a why not me moment, pivoting into that.
Well, the first time I auditioned for the Daily Show twice. I didn't get it the first time.
Oh, okay.
I blew it. It was a terrible audition. This was like 06, 07, somewhere in there. Whatever year Wyatt Cenac started was the year I auditioned. I guess they were looking Black. And I went into that audition very arrogant in a sense of, oh, well, I do journalism, my degree journalism. I do stand up. Comedy Central likes me.
I
Let me
got
just
this.
waltz on. Man, let me tell you something. An audition is just like a first date. You know whether or not you're getting a second date.
Mm-hmm.
You may not know why you ain't going to get no second date, but you know the deal. And it was evident very early on that I wasn't going to get that. And I was a little bummed out because it was a role I really wanted, and I watched the show. I'm a fan of the show, so I'm like, hey, why not? And then when it actually came to, I was like, damn, I'm sad. So fast forward 2014.
You also knew that you didn't leave your best shit in the room, though. So at least you had that self-awareness going
I thought I
into this
did.
next.
I thought I did. So here's the thing: when I don't get something, I always want to know what I'm doing wrong.
Okay.
Like the couple of years I didn't book Comic View, I watched every episode those years and like documented every topic that a comic discussed, just so I could be more in tune with, well, what are the bookers looking for? What is it that they think people want? And how do I make a joke sound like something you want, but it's still about me? You know, whatever. Man, I blew that audition, and I sat by the door just to listen to see who was next, just to see how they would do.
Right.
The laughs coming out of that room. So I'm like, oh, it wasn't them. You know, because you have a bad audition, like, well, maybe they just stare, maybe they don't laugh. No, they laugh.
Just not at you.
Your shit just wasn't funny. So fast forward 2014, Jon Stewart announces he's leaving the show. And I am, at the time, I'm done with the radio, and I was doing a sitcom over at TBS called Sullivan and Son.
Mm-hmm.
And so around this time, the sitcom is ending. And I'm talking to a buddy of mine who works over at ESPN, and he goes, "Hey man, we're doing this new thing with this woman, Jamel Hill, and this guy, and Michael Smith, podcast called His and Hers. You want to do?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do a podcast." Like, I'm fine with that. I like both of them. We have a great conversation. I do well enough with Jamel Hill and Michael Smith that it gets me rebooked to do some stuff with Bomani Jones. And then that gets me booked to do a show that they were building out in LA where I was still living at the time, called Sports Nation.
Yeah.
So now I'm a regular guest on a round robin of ESPN shows. This is back when ESPN would have comedians on a pretty regular basis, like 10 years ago.
Back in the Jason Whitlock days.
Yeah. So it's like, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, we won't go there.
so this idea of doing this round robin of shows, like I'll always say that sports is harder than politics to make funny and to make interesting, because I think people take sports way too serious and they are way too wound up about it. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, people are just waiting to attack you for saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, no one wants to hear you talk shit about their heroes.
Man, I spent a year talking shit about people's heroes. And, also sports to me has more landmines in terms of what you can and can't talk about and the angles of it. You can't talk about the owners. You can't talk about the league. You can't talk about the players. You can't insult the fan base. You can't insult the sport itself, because you're on a channel that praises the sport.
Literally the lifeline of the fucking network.
Correct. So now find me a joke. With that understanding, find me a joke that doesn't touch any of those nerve endings, and you can come back next week. So that happened for about a year of just me bouncing around on ESPN and just doing stuff and just having fun.
But finding an audience, a new audience, a bigger audience,
correct,
so to speak, right?
Correct. And sports, and then the other thing, Sports Nation was the hardest of the shows, because you're the comedian. Your job is to say something in a format like that. Your job as a comedian is to say something that no one else is thinking or considering. Mm-hmm. And by the time they get to you, three other people have talked. Michelle Beadle done said what she got to say. Max Kellerman done said what he did, and Marcellus Wiley. So by the time you get to me, all three of y'all done stepped on most of the usual premises and most of the usual things I could have said or made a joke about. So now I really got to think hard about what is the weird angle or the more interesting thing that no one else is thinking about. And that's where I started thinking, and in my opinion, developing some of the skills that I really needed that I did not have in '07 for The Daily Show.
Right.
So when 2015 comes around and it's time to audition for the show, now I know how to do this because I've just spent a year trying to find the weirdest angle on a thing. And I know that's what y'all do at Daily Show. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to find the weird angle. And I nailed the audition and booked the show. And, you know, and like in the one of the stories that I did, so when you audition for Daily Show, you do a screen test reading a script that they wrote so that they know you can bring their jokes to life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do a screen test with Trevor for a script that you wrote so that they know you bring good ideas to the table. And there was, at the time, this is like 2015. So this is the ban the Confederate flag era of anger in America, right? Mississippi had changed their flag and we're tired of people flying the flag. South Carolina had the flag up on the State House. Bree Newsom had climbed. It was all
It
of
all
that,
seems
right?
so benign now, right?
Yeah, I know, right? That we was going crazy over a flag, and now it's like, whoosh.
Wish we had those
flag days.
flag crisis back. Yeah.
Remember the good old days? And there was a kid. There was a picture of a high schooler, a black high schooler in West Virginia. It was a black kid, and he had a Confederate flag arm tat, like his full forearm was a Confederate flag. And how and the article was about black people who support the Confederacy, Confederate flag, whatever. And the segment, and it's easy to go into why would you do that? And as a black person, why would you? And so the angle I sold them on for my audition was he's a black kid in West Virginia. He has to wear a Confederate flag for safety. That's just, this is survival.
Survival skills.
Yeah. And so that was, so it was thinking like that. Mm-hmm. If you take that same story and put it 15 years prior on morning radio, we just do a call-in. What do y'all think? Would you let your kids with the flag? And that's all it would have been. Yep. Me and my co-hosts would have all given our opinions, and that would have been it. But on to get to the next, correct. But when you talk about political satire and humor within sports, you have to be able to find the weird reason or the weird thing. And so that's what the time, 2014 was very pivotal in changing how I analyzed news, which ultimately is what got me The Daily Show.
And I'm assuming like that gig is what opened up the doors for you. Like you had multiple stand-up specials on Comedy Central. Obviously that relationship led to those opportunities. What was that experience like, kind of in that television audience and that degree? Not like the Apollo, but like your show. People showing up to see you.
Redeeming in a bit, because up until I got The Daily Show, I couldn't get a half-hour special from Comedy Central. Right. And they had given out a lot of them to a lot of comedians. So there's definitely a degree of self-doubt. And it's wild to think about it now in 2024. But, you know, there was a stretch from, I'd say, 2000 till about 2018, 2019. Shit, I'll say to the pandemic. I'll give you 2000 to the pandemic. Comedy Central was a player in stand-up specials.
Oh, for sure.
You know, up until the rise of Netflix, up until Chappelle's first Netflix special. So whatever year that was, you know, 2017, somewhere in there, Comedy Central was as viable a place to get exposure as any other outlet where you watch stand-up comedy. So to not have an opportunity on the network before then, it was frustrating, but you know, it's all, I've never been jaded or angry about much of anything. I don't really hold a lot of grudges. But it was dope. It was dope to shoot that first special and to shoot it in Atlanta, where so much of my comedic roots, my first special father figure, so much of my comedic roots is in Atlanta, as much as it is Birmingham. The first 2 years of stand-up, I primarily was in Georgia, Florida, and Alabama.
Well, Atlanta's like your major city when you're like in that part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah. And people in Atlanta embraced me over the years through my ride in morning radio. And even after I left morning radio properly in Birmingham, I was on for mornings and afternoons in Atlanta for another 3 years. Then all of my time on syndicated shows from Ricky Smiley and Tom Joyner, like that stuff, that city's just always had my back. So to be able to not only do a special, but to do it where you feel like you want to be able to go back and pay homage and say thank you. And it's not a knock to Birmingham. I think what it was is that Atlanta is where I got more reps in. That's where I trained more. And that's just because there was just a higher volume of rooms. I've done a ton for the city of Birmingham. I haven't gone back to shoot a special yet, but I will, but I think it'll be the last one.
But Atlanta is also the culture, and it was becoming the culture at that time. You know what I mean? So it's just a more built-in kind of audience, and the fabric of what you're trying to do is there in a way.
Yeah,
it's not
and the place, the people who need to hear and feel this material the most live here. So I'm going to go there.
Got it. So your Comedy Central specials, The Daily Show, you got the call for the Correspondents' Dinner. We talked about a little bit the experience of the Correspondents' Dinner, but getting the call. Quickly, tell me about getting the call. You got it.
So we do Warriors at the White House in January of that year. Correspondents' Dinner is in April. Mm-hmm. I go for The Daily Show to cover the Golden State Warriors visiting the White House. While I'm there, we do segments in the press briefing room with Karine Jean-Pierre. And one of the people in the room works for the White House Correspondents Association and saw the segment. And I think what it might have helped is just the fact that, you can just see me be funny on the fly, and it's not just some in-studio stuff. The wild thing about The Daily Show, man, is that there's so many people that don't even know that I do stand-up because The Daily Show was their first introduction to me.
Right.
So you go, oh, he's fun. Oh, you do a lot of different styles of jokes. So about 2 weeks later, I get a call from my people. Yeah, they want to offer you the thing.
Did you even know you were being considered at this point, or was it just like a call out of nowhere?
No, it was out of nowhere. Like you don't even know that the streets is watching you like that.
It's pretty cool.
And then I'm like horrified that I'm even like considered, but I can't say no.
Fuck no.
You can't say no. You don't know when you're going to get an opportunity like that again. So
it's one of those moments.
Do it? Do you want to do it? Yes. Thanks. Click. And you just keel over like, oh no, my God.
I got it. I love that.
Yeah.
So I know we have a little bit more time with you. I love to ask some fun questions as well, like just get your response. So let's jump into that for a little bit, and we can wind it down. But tell me your first or biggest Hollywood crush.
See, man, questions like that, man. These women are married now and shit, and y'all don't be having us.
Talk a few years ago, women. It could be context.
Like first, I'd go Kelly Williams, a.k.a. Laura Winslow.
It's a good one. It's a really good one.
But there's also Cherie Johnson, who, like, I would say predates Laura Winslow by a couple of years because Punky Brewster came out before. She was the black friend on Punky Brewster.
You're going old school, bro. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you asked first. I mean, shit.
Or shit, you can have a crush on someone right now. I don't care.
I ain't saying shit about right now. Because what I've learned now about entertainment, Where I am now, I'm liable to probably see these people. I have seen these people. I'll
They
be
might
at
be
the
single and want you back.
NAACP Image Awards. Well, I ain't finna put the bat signal up on your podcast. You ain't finna get me in trouble. Because then I might cut off the one that actually liked me. You fuck around, name the wrong one. You're blocking your blessings. That's how you block your blessings, Mike.
We talked about dating in these streets before. I hear you though. Okay. I hear you.
There was there was Cherie Johnson. There was Kelly Williams. I think everybody had a crush on Winnie Cooper.
Oh yeah. What's her name? Danica McKellar?
Yeah. Yeah, Danica McKellar.
All
yeah,
right.
I think everybody had a crush on her. Oh, I'll tell you one that's hilarious.
Please
That
do.
the most intense and quickest crush that ended so fast was Surya Bonali.
Who?
Surya Bonali, the French figure skater who revolutionized figure skating by doing moves that were so complicated that the IOC outlawed them in Olympic competition.
Because they were too complicated, or they were like
because the white girls couldn't do them.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
we can't even do that. So no more of that. Whatever you just did, no more of that.
Okay,
like backflips and just wild. I think it was the '92 Olympics where she made a name for herself.
I'm gonna Google her later. But I got other questions for you.
But I say all of that to say, I had a crush on Surya Bonali because she was black and she was fine and she flipping and shit. And then and she won a bunch of medals. And then they interview her and she's speaking French. And I'm like, you telling me this nigga ain't even from? I don't speak French. I can't never say nothing to her. So crush over. Like literally in the course of a week, I was like, I'm at school, man. Y'all ain't watching figure skate? Man, y'all got the man. And then like a week later, never mind. Don't nobody care about it.
All right. Next question. What's the worst rumor ever spread about you?
When I got arrested, there was rumors in Birmingham that I was in prison.
That's not good.
Yeah, but that's just a game of telephone and just, I heard he got probation. I heard he was in prison. Now he on probation. I heard he's still in prison. Like, all right.
And they see the Hardys like the next day chilling.
I don't know. There hasn't been anything really heinous that's ever really gotten back to me. You know, there was a comic that, you know, there was a comic and we had a misunderstanding about a joke. And so there was some rumblings, a lot of these younger comics that were trying to call me a joke thief, but me and that comic worked it out and, peace in the Middle East. So it's cool. That's probably the only time where I've really felt some degree of my reputation being
right.
Like, wait, what? Other than that, I think the worst rumor is that I'm nice and I don't like it.
That's a horrible fucking thing to say about someone is they're nice.
Well, the problem is that it attracts more people who want you to be nice to them too. And like, I'm busy now. The store is closed.
And you don't want to be around people anyway. So,
Y'all had 25 years of my career. This next 25 is for me.
I dig that. So if you could be alive in any period of time, what period of time would that be? And how old will you want to be during that period of time?
I'd want to be 25 years old in the 90s. Do I get the knowledge I have now?
Sure. Let's go with yes.
Yeah, in the 90s.
What do you think you would be doing in the 90s as a 25-year-old?
I would be focusing more on computers for sure in the future of that. Yo, man, I know nobody's going to believe this when I say it. When YouTube first started, within a year, I had about 200,000 followers on the first account that I ever had on YouTube, and then lost it because I was just goofing off and got a copyright strike for something that wasn't even that important.
That's wild.
And like, if I still had that 200K 20 years ago and had been building that's worth more than Bitcoin.
For sure. That's crazy. 200K.
Yeah. Those were the days.
Are you a playlist guy, like with your music? Are you just listening to specific artists, or you create playlists? And if so, like, what's your like favorite playlist you're listening to right now?
I listen to a lot of old stuff, man. So I wouldn't even be fair to say that I have some new artists that I listen to. If we're talking about new artists, I enjoy Big Crit and Isaiah Rashad, and neither of them have dropped an album in a year. So are they even new? But they speak to the things that I care about, and just emotion and love and loss and spirit. I'm trying to find this one like bro, I have a playlist here that there's literally Pusha T, Yellow Wolf, Billy Ocean, Ghetto Boys, Big Mike,
Caribbean Queen.
3-6. Yeah. The Tramps, Big Timers, The Whispers, Little Uzi Vert, Childish Gambino, Jaden Smith, Jeezy, 21 Savage, Shy Glizzy.
Talk about a mix mash.
But this is the stuff I'm listening to right now. And this is what I like. So it's like, there's no science to,
just sonically your authentic
what I
self.
gravitate toward. I've been going back and re-listening to the Kill Bill Volume 1 soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
That movie's amazing, but that soundtrack is completely movie soundtracks really undersold now. I don't even think people care about them anymore.
A little bit they do. What's your favorite Hollywood story? Where you're just like, holy shit, this is some Hollywood shit right now.
I can't. I'll tell you the first time I realized Hollywood was a different place. Or just stardom is just different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I should name the group. There was an R&B group from the 90s. And I was staying at the same hotel as them for a gig.
Male group?
Yeah, male group. Okay. Lobby is full of women wearing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just as little as legally is allowed to still be in public and not be considered naked. Lobby full of these women. And I'm out front with the other comedian and we're waiting on the promoter to come and pick us up. And while we're waiting, the members of this R&B group come walking through the lobby and the girls just start following them. And I've never seen, like, you hear about groupies and you hear about, this idea of women just throwing coochie at guys or whatever. But to witness it as a young man for the first time, it was wild. So the R&B singers, they get in a limo, and then one guy gets out the limo who's like their manager or some shit, and he points to like 4 of the girls. He goes, you, 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 and you. And they all get in the limo and they giggling. The other girls are heartbroken. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Manager guy gets back in the limo and he goes, okay, ladies, if you're in this limousine, you need to know right now you are consenting to being in some adult situations. And if you don't want to be in no adult situation, you can get the fuck out the limousine right now.
Yo, that's wild, man. It's actually not that wild, but it's still pretty fucking wild.
None of the women in the limousine move.
You know they didn't.
Because everybody that was outside the limousine was waiting to take their place.
Oh, my God.
And the limousine starts up. And as the window is going up in the limousine, one of the R&B singers looks over at me and the other comedian. And he just goes, one day, boys. One day. And the limo just drove off. And I'm just sitting there like, did that just happen? And now we're like, look at Henry Coleman, without missing a beat. That's the other comedian I was with. Henry Coleman turns to the other women that aren't going to the concert now. He turns to them and goes, y'all want to go to a comedy show instead?
And the response was?
They walked off. It was performing at like a fucking Holiday Inn. Like we were performing like somewhere awful, like a National Guard armory.
Like in Burbank or something.
Yo, no, this is Valdosta, Georgia. I forgot to tell you. We're
Georgia.
in like rural, small town America. And yo, it's pretty wild. The
That's
other thing
wild.
I saw, this is lighter. The other thing I saw, the first ever time I ever went to Los Angeles was 2003 to do Star Search. And when I got to baggage claim, the first celebrity I ever saw in person was Omar Epps when I got to LA. Like in terms of sightseeing and like when you go to LA and you go back to Alabama, and did you see the stars? Well, look, I saw the stars. I saw a celebrity. And I see Omar Epps at bag claim. And I'm like, oh shit, that's Omar. And this is, he's a god already, but he's on House now. And he's
doing the thing.
I'm like, he's just a god. And I'm just like, wow, that's Omar Epps. I'm in the same city. Damn, something going right in my life. And then some old black lady walked up to Omar Epps, and I don't know what she said, but it was the equivalent of, get the bag. Like, boy, and she's like aggressively pointing to bags on the belt for him to get. And I'm like, damn, Omar Epps getting cussed out by his auntie.
Real life, real things.
It was like someone that was of aunt age and someone that could have been his daughter or a niece with him. I just distinctly remember there being two women, and Omar Epps was clearly there to pick them up from the airport. And this lady was mad about something and was like, get the bag. And I'm looking and I'm like, damn, that's wild. Omar Epps a real motherfucker. He get bags for his family. Like, it was clearly a family member. Like,
of course, he probably takes out the trash too at the crib, like real regular shit.
Talk to Omar Epps like that in fucking public, bro. just like, no, not that bag. The other bag. Get the bag off the belt.
He's a good dude, Omar. He's a good guy. I've met him a handful of times.
It was the most humbling thing I've witnessed.
One last question, and I'll let you go. When the end is near, what would you like your tombstone to read?
A vessel of life well used.
I like that.
Give me that. Stole that one from my dad.
I like it though. Roy, thank you. Thank you for being my guest. I appreciate you.